Remember when walking into your grandmother's house meant stepping into a place where everything had a spot, nothing sat out collecting dust, and the whole house felt like it had just been cleaned even though nobody was frantically rushing around with a mop? Today we are uncovering 12 reasons your grandparents' home always stayed cleaner than ours do, and the truth is that none of them had anything to do with miracle products or impossible standards, and everything to do with a way of living that we quietly abandoned without realizing what we were giving up. The first reason might sound almost too simple to matter, but it changed absolutely everything about how easy it was to keep a house clean. Homes were half the size they are today, which meant there was half as much to clean and nowhere to hide the mess. The average American home in 1950 was just under 1,000 square feet. Today, the average home is over 2,200 square feet, and somehow, despite all that extra space, we are drowning in clutter. Your grandmother's house had a kitchen, a living room, 2 or maybe 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and that was it. Every room had a clear purpose and a manageable footprint. Because the space was compact, keeping it clean was a realistic daily task instead of an overwhelming weekend project. We bought bigger houses thinking more space would make life easier, but what it actually did was give us more square footage to fill with stuff and more surfaces to dust. But the size of the house was only part of the equation, and what filled that house made an even bigger difference. Families owned a fraction of the possessions we keep today, which meant there was simply less to clean, less to organize, and less to work around. The average American home today contains roughly 300,000 items. Every single one of those things collects dust, takes up space, and needs organizing. Your grandmother's house had what the family needed and not much more. A set of dishes, not 5 sets stacked in cabinets, a good coat for each season, not a closet bursting with jackets that never get worn. When you only own what you use, cleaning becomes straightforward because you are not constantly shifting piles of things from one surface to another just to reach the counter underneath. From what filled the house to how the work of maintaining it was divided, grandparents had a system that made the burden lighter for everyone involved. Children had daily chores that were non-negotiable, which meant the workload was shared across the household instead of falling entirely on one person. Kids in the 1950s folded laundry, set the table, swept porches, dried dishes, and took out the trash as a normal part of being in a family. Saturday morning chores were especially sacred. The whole family pitched in, and by noon the house was reset and ready for the weekend. Compare that to today, where children are often excused from household work entirely, and parents shoulder the burden alone. Your grandmother did not do it all herself. The house stayed cleaner because everyone who lived in it contributed to keeping it that way. Do you remember having Saturday morning chores as a child, or watching your own children help around the house the way you once did? Tell us in the comments below. From how the work was divided to when it actually happened, grandparents followed a rhythm that kept mess from ever building into something overwhelming. Cleaning happened every single day in small, manageable bursts, not once a week in exhausting marathon sessions. Every morning the beds were made, the dishes were washed and put away, the floors were swept, and anything out of place was returned to where it belonged. Every evening the counters were wiped down, the kitchen was reset, and the house was put to rest before anyone went to bed. This daily rhythm meant that dirt and clutter never had a chance to accumulate into the kind of mess that requires hours of concentrated effort to undo. Your grandmother never had to face the dread of a filthy kitchen on a Sunday morning because she had kept up with it all week long. But daily tasks were only part of a much larger structure that extended across weeks, months, and entire seasons. There was a predictable schedule for deeper cleaning that rotated through the year, which meant nothing was ever neglected for too long. Spring brought the deep cleaning of the entire house, windows washed inside and out, curtains taken down and laundered, rugs beaten and aired. Summer was for canning and preserving. Fall was preparation for the big holidays. Winter was devoted to mending and sewing. This seasonal rhythm meant that every part of the house received serious attention at least once a year, and the rotating focus kept the work from piling up into an unmanageable burden. Your grandmother treated it as a natural part of the calendar, as predictable as the seasons themselves. Which of these reasons is hitting closest to home for you right now? Drop your answer in the comments below. From the rhythm of the work to the tools used to accomplish it, grandparents kept things beautifully simple in a way that saved both money and space. A handful of basic products handled nearly every cleaning job in the house, which meant no overflowing cabinet of specialized sprays. Your grandmother cleaned with baking soda, vinegar, borax, bar soap, and maybe a can of scouring powder. Baking soda scrubbed the sinks and the oven. Vinegar cleaned the windows and cut through grease. Borax whitened the laundry. Bar soap handled the dishes and the floors. These products worked for decades before anyone decided we needed 17 different bottles for 17 different surfaces. Today, the average American family spends $600 a year on cleaning supplies. Your grandmother would have been baffled by the idea that you needed a different cleaner for granite, for stainless steel, for glass, for tile, and for wood. But even the products themselves were not purchased new if they could be made from something the family already owned. Cleaning cloths were cut from old fabric that had served other purposes first, which meant nothing was wasted and nothing was single use. Dishcloths came from flour sacks. Dust rags were old cloth diapers. Floor cloths were made from worn-out undershirts. Everything had a second life, and sometimes a third, before it was finally thrown away. Your grandmother never walked into a store to buy a pack of disposable wipes when she could cut a square from an old towel and use it for years. This was not just frugality. It was a philosophy of making things last. We buy packages of single-use cleaning products every month and throw them in the trash after one wipe. From the tools to the philosophy behind the work itself, grandparents understood something about home care that went deeper than just keeping surfaces tidy. A clean home was treated as a mark of pride and respectability, which meant the work was given the time and attention it genuinely deserved. Your grandmother did not see housekeeping as drudgery to be avoided. She saw it as a skill, a responsibility, and a reflection of her values. A clean and orderly home meant the family was cared for. Sitting down during the day was only acceptable in the evening after the work was done. This was a culture that valued the labor of homemaking and understood that maintaining a household required real skill, real effort, and real time. We have replaced it with the idea that cleaning is something to get through as quickly as possible. Do you remember your grandmother treating housework with that kind of seriousness? Or do you still approach your own home that way today? Share your memory below. And alongside the philosophy came the simple reality that grandmothers had more hours in the day to dedicate to keeping things clean. They had more time to dedicate to the work, not because they were inefficient, but because homemaking was treated as a full profession worthy of serious hours. Women in the 1950s spent an average of 50 hours a week on household tasks: cooking, cleaning, laundry, mending, organizing, maintaining. Today, the average American spends about 2.5 hours per week on house cleaning. Your grandmother was not superhuman. She simply devoted the hours necessary to do the work properly, and those hours added up to a home that was always ready, always clean, and always welcoming. We have chosen convenience over that level of care, and we have gained time for other pursuits, but we have lost the sense of order and calm. From the hours spent to the communication patterns that kept households running smoothly, grandparents had another advantage we rarely think about. One telephone for the entire household meant conversations were purposeful, and nobody disappeared into private phone calls for hours. That heavy black rotary phone sat in the kitchen or the hallway, and when it rang, the whole house knew. Conversations were kept reasonably short because someone else might need the line. Teenagers stretched the cord around the corner for privacy, but true phone seclusion was impossible. This meant that family members stayed present in shared spaces rather than retreating to bedrooms for endless phone time. The single telephone kept communication efficient and kept people in the same room together, which meant the shared spaces stayed tidier because everyone was actually using them. And just as one telephone shaped daily routines, one other appliance changed how families managed their kitchens and their shopping habits. Smaller refrigerators meant more frequent shopping trips with fresher food and less waste accumulating in the back corners. Refrigerators in the 1950s were a fraction of the size we use today, with small freezer compartments that held maybe a week's worth of frozen items at most. This meant families shopped 2 or 3 times a week instead of loading up once a month at a warehouse store. More frequent shopping meant fresher vegetables, less forgotten food rotting in the crisper drawer, and a refrigerator that was easier to keep clean because it never became a packed mystery box of expired containers. The weekly Saturday morning trip to the market was a family routine, and the smaller appliance enforced a rhythm that kept the kitchen from becoming overwhelmed with food, that would never get eaten. These 12 reasons were not about magic or impossibly high standards. They were about a way of living that prioritized home care, valued simplicity, and understood that a clean house was the result of consistent small efforts rather than occasional heroic marathons. Your grandparents lived in smaller homes with fewer possessions. They involved the entire family in the work. They cleaned a little every day and followed a seasonal rhythm for deeper tasks. They used a handful of simple products and repurposed fabric instead of buying disposable supplies. They treated homemaking as valuable work that deserved time and attention. They had one telephone that kept everyone present and one small refrigerator that enforced fresh shopping routines. We live in bigger homes with more stuff, and somehow we are more overwhelmed than they ever were. Maybe the real difference is not the products or the square footage. Maybe it is the philosophy. Your grandmother knew that a home kept clean through daily care and simple tools would always outshine a home neglected between frantic attempts to catch up. That is something worth remembering. That is something worth honoring. Because what those women knew and what they practiced every single day was genuinely valuable. Which of these 12 reasons would make the biggest difference in your own home if you brought it back? Tell us in the comments below and subscribe to Vintage America Tales for more stories of the practical wisdom we left behind.